and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Anil Shah. He's a facial plastic surgeon in downtown Chicago, which is my hometown that I came from. I can't lose the accent. He's in private practice and has focused primarily on rhinoplasty, facelifts, and eyelid lifts for the past 18 years. Now, Dr. Shah lectures on clinical aspects of facial plastic surgeries, as well as practice management topics, and that's where I know him most from. He's got some great, unique experiences about running a practice, and he's written over 50 scientific articles. And many of his techniques are not published and are entirely unique to his practice, and I'll ask him more about that. He also regularly donates to several Chicago organizations as well as charities. Dr. Shah, welcome to Beauty and the Biz.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me on board. So what a great intro. So awesome. Thank you. I didn't know you're from Chicago too.
I'm telling you, I sound like Dick Butkus. He's an old football player from Chicago. I just have never lost it, and I've been gone for 40 years, whatever. Okay, so tell me, how did you end up in Chicago, and then how did you end up as a facial plastic surgeon?
So Chicago. So I was born in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. And then I did my training kind of throughout Chicago, but then I did my fellowship out in New York. And so we wanted to raise our kids in Chicago. So that was kind of like what we wanted to do, because now looking back at Chicago now, you might say, wow, you wanted to raise your kids in the middle of Chicago. What kind of parents are you? But it's actually a great place to raise kids. And our family's there. My wife's in the Midwest. So that's how we ended up in Chicago. As far as facial plastics goes, I have an uncle who was a head and neck surgeon in the UK. And so he was very inspirational to me, just talking to him about, his practice and all that. And so I got interested in head and neck surgery like at an absurdly young age. And then was in all these different worlds. I was like in a fashion world and this other world. And so then I had a chance to shadow a facial plastic surgeon in Florida. And I was like, this isn't even like work. This is amazing. You get to transform someone. And I was like, what a great field where I would do this for free. And so that was essentially where I was at. That's bad for business, but good for doing what you love, right?
Good for you. If you would do it for free, that's a good indication that you love your work, and then it's not work anymore. It's just purpose. So good for you. How everyone likes to hear, how did you go from wherever you started with fellowship and residency and all of that? How did you get into solo practice, and especially in downtown Chicago?
Yeah, so I started off in academics, and I really wanted to be an academic surgeon for a little bit, but the problem I had with academics, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but it was a great opportunity to really get into research, work with residents, really work on that aspect, advancing some aspects of the field. But the problem with academics is it's hard to control many elements of it. You have administrators who are really kind of guiding your practice. Even to hire someone, they give you a candidate A or B. To get Botox, it took us like 6 or 7 months. So it really wasn't a good fit for me. I'm kind of one of those people who likes to have everything done a certain way. I want it done like right away. And so that wasn't a good fit for my personality. I've also talked to some academic surgeons who were about 6 or 7 years out from it, and they didn't seem quite as fulfilled. And so for me, it was like, if I really want to control and create the practice atmosphere for me, it might be better to just like start my own practice. So that was kind of how I kind of got into that. And so I literally, I canceled about 30 cases, believe it or not, in New York. So I had practice in New York City. First, I went from academics. Then I did a quick private practice bit over there. And after I did my private practice in New York, I was like, I need to go back home. I had a lease up for 15 years. I asked my wife, and she's like, do whatever you want to do. I was like, okay. I referred them out to a bunch of surgeons in New York. I said, I'm going back to Chicago. Some came with me, said, I'll come with you. But then just opened up my own practice in Chicago after that.
How long ago was that?
Oh my God. 2008.
Okay. You mean you were living in New York, and then you said to your wife, let's move back to Chicago, and she said, okay?
Yeah. I mean, she's from the Midwest, so she wasn't, we liked New York, but we didn't have as many friends with that part of it. And then just raising kids. I didn't grow up with cousins. I didn't grow up with like this secondary family network. I have a sister, brother, parents, her family's fairly close. I thought it'd be a cool place for kids to grow up, having cousins nearby, having that network like nearby. And even if you're not that far away a plane ride, you never end up seeing people as much. You're kind of growing up kind of apart from everyone. So it was a really neat way for kids to grow up. I think my daughter, one of her best friends is her first cousin, and my other daughter, her best friend is her other cousin. And so this ability to just kind of have that family experience, it was really important for me to kind of connect that together and really stay grounded within myself and do that. So that's why Chicago for me was the natural fit.
Oh, that's fantastic. So in Chicago, I saw your building. Do you own it? Do you rent it? How is it set up in Chicago? Do you buy these condos or just rent them, or and do you have a surgery center within, or do you still do it outside?
Yeah, so I when I initially came back, I rented a space up in Water Tower. I wanted to be on Michigan Avenue, and Michigan Avenue is kind of like one of the nice avenues in Chicago. And I thought that was important to have that name with my address. And, sort of like, let me be in downtown Chicago. Let's make it happen. And that way you could sort of get all of the suburbs and everyone would kind of come to you. And it was pretty equally convenient and inconvenient at the same time. And I first started off with just a smaller space. I had, I think, 3 exam rooms, smaller lobby, and I worked out of a surgical center. And then I bought the space next, or not bought, I leased the space next to me. So I doubled my office footprint. And I started an OR over there. And then about 2021, I decided, like during COVID, everyone had these epiphanies. And one of my epiphany was like, well, let's just get a space. So the space I'm in right now, it's about a little over 6,000 square feet. And so it was like everything I wanted in this space. We have 2 ORs here. It's, I don't know how many exam rooms, like 10 exam rooms, 2 consult rooms, like everything we wanted. So there's like that aspect of it. And we decided to buy because it was just easier just to buy something than rent it out. Because it's, if you're going to invest money in a space and it's something that you're leasing, it just doesn't make sense. You might as well just buy it.
So many learn that the hard way. They think that when someone's going to take over their practice, that they're going to pay for that renovation they did 5 years ago. They're not. They don't care that you had to do that. They just want the lease. So that's a good point. When it came to the OR, did you have to do the build out yourself, or was this thing ready to go? And like, or did you have to get involved?
Yeah, we had to do all of that. We kind of had to allocate space a little bit, and some of the spaces when we looked at it were kind of like, okay, we can envision where everything's going to go. And I think that's kind of that field where I actually had a patient who I did her nose, I don't know when, like such a long time ago. And she hated my space in Water Tower. She's like, it had drop ceilings and it was just older, and hated parking there, and said, I really don't love this space. So if you ever decide to get another space, call me up. And so that's what happened. I called her up. She's an amazing designer. And so she came over and just said, hey, let's go. We walked through it. And so it's kind of a combination. I have really strong opinions on like space and design, but she has really strong opinions, and her opinions are better than my opinions. So I was like, yeah, let's do this and do that. She took what I had to say, and she just sort of like kind of incorporated it all. And we kind of envisioned everything right away. So as soon as we found the space that we wanted, we went for it.
We'll talk more about that under the marketing, because I think space and marketing go together, because you have a really interesting branding and really cool concept there. So back to the business side, does your wife works with you, right?
Oh, yeah, she does. And not initially, though. So
Okay.
initially, my wife is a primary care physician, specialized in women's health, all of that. And so in the beginning, when we were in New York, she was working, I think, independently with some big group in New York. We moved back to Chicago. She was working with the big group in the suburbs. And then eventually she saw we always talk about work a little bit, we try not to, but we sort of do. And I was like trying to always get her to work with me. Her brain is kind of like thinks completely different than my brain. And I'm such an idea guy, and I love coming up with ideas and concepts and like and visions. And she's more of an execution person. She'll kind of like stay really grounded in that. And I'm dreaming of like, this is this color, this is this shape, let's do this, let's do that. And she's really good at finding out, okay, let's do this. We can kind of coordinate. And so she really gets things done. And so the combination of us together, and so bringing her on board, not just as a physician, but also as kind of another pair of eyes on the practice and helping. I knew for a fact that I didn't want her to be an office manager because it's just so intense to do that. It's so much role. And no one ever really loves the office manager on some roles because they're delegating responsibility. And that's just not her personality. She's really about, she's a little more friendly and all that kind of aspect of it. So she's able to still thrive as a physician, but also provide that, I guess, execution on getting things done.
So she's doing cosmetic procedures as well?
Not surgery. She's an injector in my practice. She focuses on, instead of women's health in that way, she does kind of like more cosmetic women's health and things like radio frequency, and works on hair restoration with me. So more of the complementary things that we do. And a lot of times I'll start with a patient and start with the surgical component of it. And then she'll see the patient on another level, and she'll see them for lasers, injectables. And again, for her, this is, she loves all of her patients. So it's kind of another way. And primary care, it's changed over the last 30 years, where, again, my dad was a physician, a GI physician. We did a lot of primary care too. You really got a chance in the old days. You got to know your patients, talk to them. You know all about them. You knew about their family. If someone had a problem, they would call you up and you take care of them. And I think aesthetics, in some ways, has become more of that sort of like that go-to person, that therapist. And so for her, it was like a natural fit where she could talk to someone and the skills. Her dad's a surgeon. She's actually pretty good technically, and that was easy for her to learn. And the other aspect of it. So yeah, it was easy for her.
So are you two glad you're working together? Because I've watched a lot of husband and wife teams work together. Oftentimes it goes very well. Other times it can go sideways. It's not as fun as they thought it was going to be. But how's it going with the husband and wife team?
Yeah. So the first day, again, it was subtle suggestions over many years. And so the first day I really suggested it and she was going to do it. I think she came home and she kind of slammed the keys down. It was like, that's why I can't work with you. And I was like, oh boy. And I think since then, it was just kind of this idea of we both had to find our space. And since this is the field I'm like really, really well trained in, and I'm a facial plastic surgeon, I really know the anatomy well. Me training her to be, again, training her as an injector, training her to know everything I know as far as the non-surgical side. It's always a little bit humbling when you get introduced to the field of aesthetics because you're starting new, and she knows so many other things on primary care and health. So that was a bit of an aspect of her change. But then she looked at the world and looked at what I did differently too, and she's changed things as she became really experienced in that. And then now it's not an issue. Again, we've been married actually 20 years now, and yeah, it's just really not that much of an issue. And but when we first started, I don't think she was as excited about it now, but now I think she's really, really. I talked to her; she's really happy she made that move.
Oh, good.
Maybe not happy, but to her friends.
Okay. And do you have a good work-life balance, or do you just talk about work all the time?
I try not to talk about work. Like when I was in medical school, I purposely would not try to date medical students, and that part of it. And I always try to keep those worlds separate. Sometimes they cross over a little bit at work, but at home, when things happen. But for the most part, there's so many things going on where, I don't know, we're traveling a lot. We have 3 kids together. And I'm involved in things that are different. I'm always involved in research, and she's involved in helping with all these things and helping with the practice, helping with this, and just with family and all that. And just socially, it's just work is part of what we talk about, but it's definitely like a smaller percentage of that.
Good for you. So if she's not managing the team, who is?
Aurora. Aurora is amazing. And she has an awesome background. I never actually, like, when I look for people who are actually like on paper supposed to be amazing for it, they sometimes turn out well, sometimes they don't. And Aurora's background is interesting because her background was in psychology and computer science. And I was like, first of all, I love technology. I love how that can be implemented to make life a lot easier. And I love how Aurora can really think clearly and how she just kind of thought like process-wise how to fix things. And I think with a manager, there's so many different skill sets. Psychology is, of course, super important, knowing what I know. And again, being able to handle not just staff, but patients, and just kind of everyone together. And so really a great fit. And that background, computer science and psychology for me was like, it's a perfect fit for our office.
Congratulations, because the skill set of an office manager in today's world, they have to have tech They have to understand this because the whole world went technical, and they have to have the really good people skills. They oftentimes have to be the disciplinarian, because I wouldn't want the doctor to be, because everyone's got to love you. So she often has to be the bad guy. And you have a nice team. Like, what's your, like, how many providers do you have that are revenue generating providers versus like the support team?
Yeah, so revenue generators. So we have myself, my wife, then we have two nurses, one PA, one esthetician, and then one like laser, who's kind of beyond laser, but kind of like laser, almost like an esthetician. So I guess that's 7.
Nice. So you have several profit centers. Yep.
Oh, and actually, I have one more person who does full sculpting. 8. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, and so each one is in kind of their own world. That's right.
Good. And do you have metrics and KPIs to keep them on track? Because it looks like you don't want to be the only revenue generator, which is a really good idea. How is that going?
I always think it's harder to get non-surgical providers busier initially than it is for surgical providers, because surgical providers, people are willing to travel like all over the world to have the right surgeon do their surgery. Necks, noses, whatever. But I think it's harder to stand out for non-surgical things because there's just a flood of them. I mean, if I look outside my window, I can see 3 med spas. And so that part of it is there's so many providers out there. That being said, I think once they come in and patients come into our office, there's a couple of little nuances in the way they feel and the techniques that we do that they tend to stay. It's not 100% retention, but it's a high level of retention.
How do you develop your culture, and how would you describe your culture?
I think it's a we culture and not a me culture. And that tends to be what works well for our office. We've kind of figured out. We've had some me people who come in and they're skilled in their own right, but it's always about them. And when it's always about them, it takes away from the other staff members. It takes away from from everyone else there. And it's always about their, it takes away that part of it. And we're in such a, you have to be so kind and, and caring to so many people. Your coworkers, your patients, you just have to be willing to contribute to everyone. So I think it's a we culture, not a me culture. And that's kind of what we look for. So generally speaking, it's not that complicated. It's just, if you're a team player and you're a nice person, you're probably going to work out really well here. If you're going to come in and talk about yourself for an hour and a half, you're probably going to do that with your patient or our patients. And it's going to be kind of boring. It's actually hard to listen to those people.
I definitely have gone to injectors who were all about themselves. I didn't get a word in edgewise, and I thought, what an odd way to develop a relationship. So yeah, it's temporary. So let me ask you this. What would you, out of like running your own show now for 18 years, what's been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge probably, and there's a couple of challenges you have to talk about, but the biggest challenge I think is staffing. I think keeping staff happy has always been one of those challenges that I think we've evolved, and I think we've gotten a lot better. And again, I have some people with me who've been here with me for like 15 years, 12 years, 11 years, but keeping staff happy, because certain people, I think they can work with you, but not identifying the right staff, not identifying the right team member. And again, sometimes someone looks like they're going to be a we person, they're a me person. So I think it's keeping staff happy, keeping them so that they're going to really have your best interests in mind, and which is ultimately their own best interest in mind too. That's probably the hardest.
How do you keep them motivated? Any tips there?
I like this randomness seems to work well. And then having like moments when they can kind of recover and recuperate, and we can get things done in projects. So randomness means you have random days of just some surprises that happen in the office. Random days means you meet up we're going to play ping pong, we're going to go dancing, we'll do something fun. And random activities is just because people get to know each other, not just on a work level, but kind of on a level of who are we really dealing with. That's kind of fun. Not trying to be have too much delegation. No one likes to be told what to do. So we all know what needs to get done. And so if you're hiring responsible adults, they'll get it done. that part of it. But if you delegate and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, why don't you do this? No one really likes that. So we've worked with that and tried to kind of like, here's what needs to get done, but let's not really delegate that. That seems to be helpful. And then knowing that, and I think it's also a deeper level maybe of understanding and care too. I think everyone kind of cares for each other on some level. And so that also keeps people motivated, because at the end of the day, everyone who's here, I think, cares about the practice. And so
Yeah, no, it comes through on your Instagram. It feels like you have a fun office. It seems that way anyway. Regarding growth, is there any plan to grow any further in Chicago? I also noticed you have another office in Winnetka, which is a very high-end Chicago neighborhood.
yeah, we definitely have some plans, and probably some surprises coming out in the next year or so. And I think the cool thing about this is there's blueprints for how you can run your career and your practice. And then there's sort of things you just do because, again, if you're just having fun and doing what you love, you do whatever you want. And that's the fun part of it. So I have a major curveball coming out, which I will not reveal here. But that is like, whoa, where did that come from? And then Winnetka is up in the North Shore, which is great. We had so many patients who were asking about that. There's probably another one or two local offices where, again, patients like just literally they just demand to have an office near them, and it works out well for them. So there's a major curveball probably coming up in maybe the next 6 months.
You're seriously not going to tell us?
No, but you'll know. I'll see you at a meeting, and that part of it is because it's not completely, ink is not dry yet, but yeah.
Okay. Well, the suspense is going to kill me. So you let me know as soon as you can.
You'll be on that list. I'll give you, okay.
Please. So let's talk about marketing, because you're really good at this. And I've heard you speak at the meetings quite a bit. And I mean, you talked on the clinical side, but they often have you talking on the practice management side. And I just love how you differentiate yourself. And let's just start with, for example, your reception area. Can you just describe it?
Yeah, so the reception area, I think what happens is anyone who goes to a doctor's office instantly hates the doctor's office. There's so many things about being in a doctor's office where you just don't like it. No one really likes to wait. However, if you go to a spa, the idea is that people don't mind as much to wait a little bit. So the idea is not really to make it a reception area, but more of like a spa lounge. And the idea over there is you're greeted with your name, your first name, and usually our Ramona knows basically everyone's name who comes in. And this idea, you're going to have some sort of fancy water available for you. You can hang out there, but usually you're going to go right back into a room. So you want them to almost want to hang out in there and linger versus sort of sitting in these kind of sterile doctor office chairs. And I think that seems to work out better for that. And again, it sort of hopefully sets the mood that, we're in for hopefully a nice day.
It's very loungy. I thought it was, I think it's fantastic that you just took the whole medicinal side out of it. And it's a place I would love to hang out. Isn't there a fireplace there too or something?
Fireplace. Again, that was with my designer. So we just talked about things and things that I didn't like, and then how we can do this. And again, if you do everything like everyone else does, then you have the same feel. Everyone has the same feeling when you go there. But if you just do what you want, ultimately what you want is what maybe a lot of other people want too. Even in the consult room, I'm not jumping ahead a little bit, but it seems like everyone who goes to a consult, there's like a desk between you and the patient. And what it does is sort of creates this barrier, right? Some people will put their, like talk show hosts, put their chair a little higher than the patient and have this like power dynamic going on, which that's not fun. So in our office, in our consult rooms, there's no desks. It's basically just a couch and a couple chairs, and we have a TV over there. And we're just hanging out. So we just talk to them and find out what they need. And I don't want them to feel intimidated. I want them to know what they really want. I want them to be able to open up to me. And again, the idea is not to have me sort of tell them, hey, I'm going to tell you what you want, and that's it. That's final. This is what you get. If you want it, you want it. You can leave. You can leave. I know some of my friends and colleagues who are really good surgeons. That's just how they are. For me, it's going to be, hey, I'll tell you what I recommend, but tell me what you want to. I want to know what you've been thinking about this for a while. I don't want to make you feel insecure either, because all of us are going to undergo some of these things, possibly.
But what do you do when the woman comes in and she's, your staff has talked to her. You think as a patient, I only need a little something on my jowls. And you as a surgeon know darn well she needs some neck, she needs some jowl, probably a bleph and brow lift. How do you get from that discussion going from one procedure that she has in mind to the one you want to do? How do you come to terms with that and come to an agreement?
I just tell them what they need. And that's simple. If they don't need something, or I don't think they need it, they're not going to get that recommendation. Because I think when a patient's coming to you, they want guidance, and they may have ideas of what's happening, but they don't really know what they want. 100%. They know that when they're maybe looking in the mirror, they're seeing certain things that bother them. And then for me as a surgeon, I'm there to identify those things as well, and maybe translate what that means, whether it's surgical or non-surgical, but also show them some of the limitations of some techniques and how some other techniques can be better than that. So that to me makes the most sense. So I just tell them, I'm going to tell you everything I see, and let's just talk about it. We'll have an open conversation. And if it's not meant to be offensive, it's meant to say, hey, let's make these changes if you want to. So if someone has a little bit of jowls, there might be an answer where they might not need surgery at that point, but they might need everything like we talked about. And so, and both of those are good answers. And it's what makes that patient feel comfortable is going to be the most important.
I just know cosmetic patients want the minimal possible, and the surgeon wants the best result. That's how you get your exceptional results. And there can be a huge gap between those two things. And especially in today's world, because if you've been on the internet at all as a patient, you just think you don't even need surgery anymore. It's amazing. Like, you can just do all of this with a laser. And how much has that changed your consultations with these patients showing up ready with their research, and they're going down the wrong path and you need to bring them back again? How difficult is that getting?
They come in some of them come in pretty educated and realistic, but there's some who've gone down that path. And, someone who has page and page and page of question, that's okay. We're going to talk about so many things. And lots of times we end up answering their questions just from like normal conversation. And then it's kind of cool when patients do a lot of research too, in the sense that, I literally, that's part of what I do. So there's a lot of misconceptions about things. And so we'll talk about it. And there's generic terms too that they might think, hey, I need this procedure done or that procedure done. And we'll say, hey, so if someone comes in who's an engineer, I'll tell them how this works. This is what we're going to talk about. And this is why, for example, this technique that I do might not be the right technique for them, but this is why it works. And if they really come in, I'll show them the technique on my screen. So if they want to see it, I'll show them exactly what I'm doing and why I do it. And if people know the why, then it might make sense to them. And if it's someone who doesn't want to see, of course, I'm not going to show them something graphic surgically. But the patients now are very different from the patients from the year 2000, 2001. If you showed them something graphic from the year 2001, they would walk out like, what is this guy showing me? But if you're seeing this now, a lot of them have already seen YouTube clips. If they've done a lot of Google research, they've looked at YouTube clips, they know what's going on. And as a surgeon, you're like, yeah, this is exactly what I do. And this is what I'm going to do for you specifically. So they want it. The more they know, the better off they are as a patient for you, and the better off they are for themselves, because it's not some generic procedure.
And I don't want to forget this. You do unique procedures exclusive to your practice. Can you just give us an example of what that means?
Some different things. For example, we'll talk about one thing. So when patients come in, most people who get a face and neck lift consult, they'll just talk to someone about what they can do. They'll show them some before and afters. For me, the first thing you're going to do when you're getting that is you're probably going to get an ultrasound of your neck. I'm going to perform an ultrasound on you. And you're like, why would you want an ultrasound on my neck? That is so clinical. But again, you're putting these two worlds together. You're putting the science and you're putting the beauty. And sometimes you hear surgeons talking about like, I don't care about science components of it. I'm really an artist. And I go, you're an artist. Okay, show me your drawings and paintings. I'm like, I wouldn't say it to their face, but I'm like, that's horrible. That being said, everyone thinks they're an artist, every surgeon, but you have to put these two worlds together. Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps one of the best artists in the history of the world. You know what he was besides an artist? A scientist. He studied anatomy. There's so many things and inventions. His brain was thinking so far ahead of everyone else. He's putting these worlds together. And so for patients that come in, they want to know they're going to be beautiful, but they also want to know that there's some sort of scientific principle behind it. So, for example, someone coming in for their neck, they might, this is a patient the other day, her neck might look actually pretty good, but underneath there could be something like a submandibular gland that's enlarged. She could have either buccal fat or gel fat. And so they're going to see it all and they can make that determination. So I'm not going to sell anyone in anything. I want them to want to do it. So if they see this, and they see this on an ultrasound in real life, they know what's going on. And so it's more about putting the worlds of science and beauty together and not in opposition.
Gotcha. By the way, are you doing more local or let's say local sedation nowadays than general? Are the patients asking for that?
Um, way back when someone would talk about that, but not really. I think it's more about like they want me for a specific technique. They say, I want you to do my nose. And someone will ask you, can you please do this under local? By the way, I can't even see my dentist. I have to be in large amounts of pain meds. I'm like, oh my God, we both don't want to do that because you're going to be so small. So then it usually ends with that conversation. Some face and neck patients were a little bit more skeptical of having things done under general IV sedation, that part of it. And some people ask for IV sedation, not knowing what IV sedation is. So again, I'm going to go back to talking to them, not like they're someone who knows nothing, but talking to them like they're really educated and say, hey, here's what we can do with IV sedation. Here's what we can do with general. Here's an LMA. This is what I do. And 99.99% of them are like, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Are you using a lot of technology to educate the patients, like the ultrasound? Because you're pretty tech savvy. Has that permeated through the patient experience in your office?
A little bit. I think the more they understand, the better. For example, understanding their nose. 3D imaging is, again, it's pretty ubiquitous, but it's still out there. It's super helpful for them to understand what's going on and quantifying changes and talking about that. They love seeing that. So technology for that is super important. We talked about ultrasound for the neck, also 3D imaging for the neck, super important because again, creating those changes, seeing those changes, not the slide up before, but after. And that's super important. Having images and computer screens when you're working on them, not just sort of taking an image and sort of saying, oh, I made this image, it's in my mind. That's not really scientific. Having the image literally right in front of you on a large screen TV, so you can see the overlap and the changes in quantifiable parts. I mean, that's super helpful. And then obviously with a lot of the devices you're using in the OR, you want exacting instruments. You don't want to use some of the older instruments from days past.
Right. In my book, I interviewed cosmetic patients, and something like 96% of them wanted computer imaging. And so many practices fight that. They say, oh, what if my result isn't as good as the photo was that I did? Well, make sure it is and don't oversell it. But patients love to see themselves in the before and the after. So I highly recommend just get good at it and don't oversell. But gosh, what a great sales tool or an educating tool, because the word a little to you could be a whole lot different than the word little to them. So it's a great leveler, to communicate with.
Yeah, I've done like about 7,000 noses, and I've never not imaged a nose on someone. So they have to be imaged. Even non-surgical rhinos, which I don't do that many, but when I see them, they have to be imaged. They have to know what they can potentially look like. Because, I mean, the analogy over here is like, again, if you're going to redo your kitchen, you'd want to get something visual. You'd want to get so if you're changing your nose, if you just go in there with blind faith and say, let's just do what you do, as a surgeon, you don't really have the guidance. You don't know what the patient really wants. And then for me doing it, I come up with this imaging idea. So the first idea I come up with is I make the image that I want. I tell them, I'm just going to talk to you for a little bit. I'm going to vibe with you. And based on that, I'll come up with an image, which sounds like it'd be really hard to do, just kind of like come up with a random image. But just from doing this for, I guess, almost 20 years, I'm usually really, really close. And then what I do is I have them take my image and tweak their image to what they want. And it's usually not a major change. They're really close. And Nick, you see those two different images, right? You see that they're pretty close. So that part of it is, it's kind of fun. And then they know right away that I'm kind of thinking like how they want their nose to be. It's not me just agreeing with them saying, yeah, I'm going to take your bump off and I'm going to straighten your nose and I'm going to do that. Well, who knows what that means? but they're like seeing all these little nuances. Like, yeah, I didn't realize my left nostril was a little higher than my right. I didn't realize that my septum was really quick in that part of this. I didn't realize that my bump is more complicated than that, three-dimensional. And they don't have to outline that. They'll just see it when I image it.
Right. I did notice that, you're doing the facial surgery, but you're also, it's got acne, you have hair transplant, you have male enhancement, which is fine. So it sounds like you're more of a patients for life kind of person versus a one and done. Is that your philosophy?
I actually learned this. I used to be the InMode spokesperson for Canada. I did a little in the US, but I was a spokesperson for Canada. So I used to go to all these like random Canadian cities. And one of the spokespeople was Dr. Stephen Mulholland, who is like phenomenal speaker. And so I went to a few of his talks just to hear him speak. And I was just like, he's probably like, if he's not the best speaker in facial plastics, like he's going to be like top 4 or 5. And so just hearing him talk, he's just so entertaining, has that part of it. But one of his expressions was, there's only one way you leave my practice, and that's if you die. And he goes, and even if you die, guess what? We're going to the funeral and we're getting all your friends. And so it's just kind of, but the expression on that is, he's obviously joking, but the expression is, you really don't want your patients going from other practice to other practice. You want them to kind of stay within your office. And the beauty of that is they can kind of take their results, they can enhance it to another level. You'll know how to enhance them better than anyone else. And then in some instances, if they go to another practice, some doctors, I would say, are not necessarily the gentlest doctors in the world. They think anything they've done is an A+++, and anything that anyone else has done is not. And you're like, who are these people? And then sometimes their work is obviously not A+. So those kind of people are not the best to have your patients going around seeing these random people who are not as nice as you would think. So it's better for yourself as a surgeon to keep your patients in-house, because sometimes these passive aggressive people, they're not good for your patients. And I mean, these conversations sometimes go like this. Who did you see? Dr. Shah? Oh, wow. I don't like your nose. Like, oh, you didn't do your nose, you did yours. Oh, wow. I don't like, they keep going just to find something to be negative about because they didn't do it. And they feel like they're personally jilted. And that's not good for aesthetics. I think aesthetics is good when we just sort of, if someone has a good result, support them. So that's why I like to keep my patients in-house, feel better. So.
That's fantastic. Dr. Mulholland and I, we used to be on the podium for, we used to do workshops for PD something threads, they used to be called something else. Anyway, threads. And it was a long time ago when threads are nothing like they are right now. And it was wild. He is an interesting guy. He knew how many hours he had left to live, that kind of guy. Like, he's very analytical, but very good marketer. Fascinating guy. Anyway. So let's talk about marketing, because you are, so that's what I wanted to ask about, because you have so many different target markets that you're going after. What's your marketing plan? Do you have different websites set up, different Instagram channels? Like, how are you catering to the aging face and the rhinoplasty, who's usually younger, and the hair transplant guy who's usually, a male? How are you, attracting all of them?
Yeah. So different people kind of see you in different worlds and avenues. So rhinoplasty and facelift patients tend to be, again, I think those are technically the easiest to market to, but because it's the hardest surgeries to do. So if someone says, I want to be really good at neck lifts and rhinoplasty, that's great. Just be really good at neck lifts and facelifts, not that part of it. So if someone likes what you do, they're probably going to find you and say, I really love your style. And because everyone's going to have some proprietary techniques that are just slightly different from other surgeons. So in many ways, that's probably the easiest way to get busy with that. The other parts of it, like random, like having hair, male enhancement, cool sculpting, we have different websites. Now, talking to some different web vendors, like, you have way too many websites, who knows? So, but we almost think of those as different brands and different channels. Like, someone who's coming to see me for male enhancement probably is not an existing patient. They're looking at male enhancement and they see our office, and that's part of one of those things. And so that's probably not going to be someone who's seen our practice, seen me in the past. And I may never get to know that patient, that part of it, because they're coming on this different channel, if that makes sense. And so on the other hand, if someone coming for hair, they may end up seeing my wife, again, non-surgical, unless they turn into a hair transplant patient, which again, I'll have a small part of that, but she's going to have a bigger part of that. Again, more on that I call non-surgical. So different websites, different Instagrams, and but a lot of the patients who go for like Botox, filler, skincare, a lot of them started off as a surgical patient. I would say that there's at least 50 to 60% of them, and they're at that point they're really happy, they're brand happy, and again, imagine if you've had 3 rhinoplasties in the past and you're not happy, then you come in and you're happy with your nose. I think you're happy. You're happy with the brand and you kind of believe what we do and what you're a big fan. So training fans, training people are really happy about the practice. That's awesome. We see a lot of patients for necks who've had like 4 or 5 lipos. They've had all this other stuff done. And once they're happy with their neck, again, they're going to be fans. So then they'll stay with some of our other providers. And they know that we're not trying to necessarily do things that don't work. It's more about, other things that are going to be important to maintain the result.
For sure. Do you spend much time on social media? You have a great following, something like 379,000 followers. So someone's spending some time on there. But honestly, because a lot of guys who have that kind of following, they're spending some time on it and they have a team helping them with it. What's your situation?
Definitely have a team. You have to have a team. And people talk about having outside agencies help them, but they always say the only person who's going to know your brand better is yourself and your team, because you know what's going on. So in our practice, we have 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 social media in-house, and then web stuff we do kind of separate. It's like, because it's hard to kind of be good at all those, but just from like branding purposes, in-house, we do all of that. And I think it's just better, because if you work with an outside agency, you're going to get generic things that they're working with everyone. How do they know your practice? Versus inside, we're like, what are we working on? What's different? Who came into the office? And so my main head of design has been with me 7 years, and and super talented. Everyone that works together, and so we'll have a meeting, usually about twice a week. We'll talk about things. And I'm not a singing dance. Actually, I do dance, but I'm not on social media, because I don't think it's good for my brand. So the idea with this is we'll go over a plan of what's going on. The star of my practice is not me. The star of my practice is my patients. And that's it. So if you see my patients and you're happy with them, then that's the idea.
So talking about your patients, how did you get so many photo consents for your patients to show their photos on your Instagram and website? Because so many doctors say to me, oh, my patients would never agree to that. Yet somebody down the street has them. Any secrets there?
I think part of it is, once you start having a collection of patients who are on social media, they actually ask to be on social media. And it's interesting that, I don't know, maybe I got lucky with a few early patients who are just like, yeah, I definitely want you. Like, they don't just say like, you can use my photos for social media. Oftentimes they're like, they'll DM us, okay, you didn't put my pictures up yet on social media. Like, when are you going to put up my posts? Like, when did you do that? Like, I just took these like pictures. So we get more of that. And so we have a huge backlog of patients we haven't even posted that part of it. So I think we've been lucky, because I think earlier on, patients were posting, and then we were able to just sort of like, patients just ask for that. So I think that's been part of it. And then
They're not asking. They're literally just they're doing it. They're just organically just saying, yeah. Sure.
Well, and then as part of their consents, there's an option to do social media. But that's another thing that you can have that say, do you want to do social media? That part of it. But I think but even before they get to consent, some of them are already wanting to do it. Like, do you mind if I film this? Do you mind if I film that? Do you mind if I do that? I'm like, yeah, it's yourself. Of course you can film that process.
Yeah. I do like the idea of having that conversation early during the photo consent, like during the paperwork side. When you have it early, the expectation's already set, but in a conversational way. Nobody's pushing anyone to do anything, but it definitely plants that seed that, yeah, you would love to have their photos if they are so inclined. I like that. The timing on that's really good.
Yeah, and I think it's every year patients get more and more open to having that done. I mean, there's so many things they're just open about. Again, the year 2005, 6, people wanted like secret back doors to offices, and everyone was all incognito and putting glasses and scarves on. Now people are like posting with their cast on and talking about that. It's just a much more open world in society. And plastic surgery, again, is much more ubiquitous. So again, I think society's changed a lot.
And where do influencers fit into your marketing plan? Are you using them? Have you had good luck if you do?
We've worked with some in the past. I think they've usually not been as successful as we thought. But that being said, I think there's probably a better understanding. I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we were working with some, and they would come in and like be really demanding on what they wanted, and like, I'm so and so, and I have, 100,000 followers, or I have 500,000 followers. I'm this and that person. And now I think there's an understanding that I think everyone wants to kind of benefit from that part of it. So a lot of them are organic who come in, who just say, I'm going to post this and that. But I think in the past that we've worked with some, and I don't know if it's just a good ROI, but it's good for branding and good for that part of it. And if they reach out to you and say, I'd really love you to do this or that, we'll have a conversation and think whether it's something we want to do to entertain.
I would say from my point of view, from a marketing standpoint, I think it's going to get more and more important to find the right influencers that work well with you and you work well with them, and everyone's real clear and it's a win-win. As Google and AI and all of that gets more complicated, your unique content is going to be more important than ever. So if you're having any luck with it at all, I would just keep refining it and prioritizing it. Same thing with, like, you did a good job with PR at times. You've gotten some good PR. Can you still pay for that? Is it even worth it anymore? Can you just produce your own PR on your own Instagram channel? Where are you at with that?
We've gone back and forth with that, I think, with PR. And I think earlier on when I was in New York, it was actually pretty easy to get PR. New York's super easy. I think it's the PR capital of the world. And so you literally go out to dinner and you're going to run into an editor. I mean, it's just like everyone's all there's an editor. And so it's easy to say, oh, who are you? What do you do? Like, tell me something. Hey, you want a story on that? You're like, wow, that's easy. I think in other cities, it's not quite as easy. So I think PR can be helpful for branding, that part of it, and letting someone know, hey, you've been featured in this and that. I don't know if it's, but I think it's an important part of strategy. Again, we haven't really embraced that as much. I think press releases are reasonable to look at. I think we've gone back and forth on that. But again, I don't know if I have a strong opinion on that.
Well, let's talk about your book, because there's a good PR opportunity right there.
There we go. See, maybe I definitely need help in all these areas. The book. Let's talk about it.
Is that a B2B book, a B2C? What is it?
More for the consumer.
Oh, good.
That was the part. So the idea was that educating people on what's more about the nose and what's out there. And obviously, every patient cannot see me as a surgeon, but there's certain questions. And where I kind of like the impetus behind this was that there's some patients who see you that, especially if you see them for revision, and you're like, you know what, I wish this person was educated to ask these questions, because if they had asked these questions, they probably would know that the doctor they're seeing is or is not qualified to do this procedure. And sometimes it's simple things like that. And there's some great doctors, but some people say, I'm going to do everything. And even if I do 3 rhinoplasties a year, I think I'm really good at it. And there's ways of asking that question where you can talk to a surgeon and ask certain questions where you as a patient can find out, are they really doing that many procedures of that a year? And if you ask those questions, then you'll have more of an open, honest answer about what's their skill set. And, my philosophy has always been simple. If I don't think I do it really well or the best, I send it out. That's easy. Why do something you don't think you do the best? Why would you do that to a patient? But some people have a different philosophy. They say, hey, just because I can do it, you're going to come see me. And patients, and again, it's worse for the fields in general, worse for plastic surgery and facial plastic surgery, to have people doing procedures that they don't excel at. So that was the idea, is so that patients don't get burned in their quest to get a rhinoplasty. And what are the questions they should ask, and what are the ways to look for that? And then it goes over some technical details. But again, if you ask a surgeon certain questions, they might be shocked that you're asking this kind of question. And then they're like, oh, you'll kind of know instantly who can do this and who can't.
But isn't it a great marketing strategy that you have, like to say that you're an author, to show your book, to have it on? Do you have it on Amazon?
Well, we have it on Amazon. It's all over, but I don't know if in market, I don't know if it's changed business. It's not like, I had a book and I was like, you know what? My life is different. That part of it.
I think those days are over. I think, you're at this point, we're just trying to put a whole bunch of poles in the pond and see what sticks.
Exactly. That part of it. So I don't know if it changed my life and said all of a sudden it's part of it, but it's kind of interesting that patients like to read it and learn about it. They're educated more. And if they're waiting in my office, hopefully they're not waiting in the waiting room. They're in some other room, which may be worse than waiting in a waiting room. That they might read that and they'll have some more questions to ask.
Yeah, they definitely need to see that book before they see you, because it'll elevate your status, your credibility, your trustworthiness. I would just use that book a lot. There's so many places to use it. I wouldn't take it for granted because not many doctors bother to do it. And that's a really big differentiator. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Give me a crazy patient or staff story that you care to share.
Oh my God, I have so many staff and patient stories that are crazy.
Yeah.
So I'll go with the staff one.
Okay.
One was a manager we had who was super sweet and had all the qualifications. I think was really good at her job. But one thing was we had to keep track of her schedule. So she was in charge of hours. We have a couple managers, and she helped install this camera system. So she knew she was being recorded. And so, and she would write her times where she was coming at 6 a.m. when she was in fact coming at like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And then she would say she was leaving at 7 p.m., leaving at 3 o'clock. And then some of her text messages are like, I have to leave early to go to a doctor's appointment, doing this and this, but she's still clocking, like then she pretended she couldn't do the app. So again, that was kind of interesting. And again, you hate to think that she was doing this on purpose, but on the other hand, sometimes people take advantage of things. So either way, the thought there was either she was not being honest with us, or she wasn't qualified to kind of run an office or practice. So
What do you think it was?
which one do I think it was? I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but that part of it is either way, it wasn't a good fit for us. And again,
interesting.
probably more me than we. And that part of it is, it doesn't mean they're not going to be a good fit somewhere else and not excel somewhere else. But it's just that part where just probably wasn't a good fit for us.
I always say you don't have to fire anybody, but you are freeing them to go somewhere where they are a better fit and they'll be happier, because you don't need that. However it's happening, you don't need that. This is difficult enough in today's world without.
Yeah, you hope that sometimes some people have left, like, sometimes we try to give really constructive feedback on things, and no one loves feedback, and that part of it is, but sometimes you'll hear through the grapevine, like, how's so-and-so doing? And they're like, yeah, it didn't work out for them over there. It didn't work because they didn't really make a change to behavior. And again, you want everyone to succeed. You want them to say, hey, guess what? They worked over here and now they've learned maybe from this or that behavior, and now they're going to do this and elevate. But, sometimes it's hard to break some habits, and that part of it. So, but not all, but some.
I agree. We're going to wrap it up now. And the last question that I love is, tell us something we don't know about you.
Okay. I'm going to jump into something what am I going to do? Okay. So I have this new way of keeping fit. Okay. I actually learned about this on vacation. You're going to laugh at me, but I'll say it anyways.
Where did you go?
So I was in Mexico, and I was doing these, like, I always want to try different skill sets. And so they had like Latin dance, and they had Zumba, which I didn't think would be that difficult, but my heart rate got up. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing this. So at night, every night for like 30 minutes, I put on this YouTube channel called Hip Hop Fit. And then I'm not going to demonstrate because I want to have some patients still come to see me. But anyways, it's kind of interesting because it works on your cerebellum. It works on your coordination. I'm not really a dancer, but then you're forced to kind of learn something. Your heart rate goes up. And then the next thing you know, after 30 minutes, you're you're done with your exercise, that bit of it, at least you got 30 minutes of cardio in, and then you can still do weights and other things. But that fun thing of it is it's a cool way of doing cardio. So I would say hip hop fit. His name is Mike Peel. I don't work for him. I'm not a hip hop dancer, Catherine, but it's interesting, that part of it. I always like to mix things up a little bit, and that's right now my current thing.
But the question is, did you keep it up when you came home from vacation?
Oh yeah, that's what I do every night. I have it in the basement. My wife, when I first went down there, she's like, "What are you dancing to? What are you doing?" And I said something in some hip hop lingo. I was like, "Samia, don't mess with my hip hop." So, and then she was like, "Okay." Then she left. But then my daughter joined me a couple times, and then but now it's sort of like it's a solo project. So.
Oh, whatever it takes, though, to get you to move. Personally, you'll never catch me ever dancing because it's just not my thing. But I used to love, a million years ago, they were just good old aerobic classes. And I liked them so much because I didn't have to have any rhythm because I have zero. It was very structured, and I love. And then I moved to San Francisco instead of Chicago because I tried to jog in Chicago, and you could die in that winter weather. So
Yeah.
then I moved to San Francisco, and then I would just start jogging down to the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was so... I just needed to find my groove, and then I never stopped. I became an exercise fanatic, like day 2 when I got to San Francisco, and never went back. So you just have to find what works for you, and hip hop apparently is your thing. Good for you. You might want to practice though for TikTok because that's up and coming.
Not my thing, not my thing for that. So more for, but the fitness part. I mean, it's such an important part, so that almost everyone who's successful is like, they're so into fitness, so into health. And I can tell just from talking to you that you can tell that you're super, super fit. And that part of it is, I think it's really hard to sustain success. I mean, you can achieve success, but to sustain success over time, you have to have that devotion to keep yourself healthy, keep that stamina, and you have to be into the fitness part of it, because if you're not going to perform well. And so it's something that's super important to me. Aside from hip hop, there's lots of other things you can do.
Yeah. Well, for me, it started out for my body, but then it really was my mindset. It helped me so much develop discipline and staying honest with me. If I said I was going to do it, I do it. And I'm real habitual. I didn't realize how much so until I was. And that has just changed everything. So anyway, for everybody out there, I highly recommend you find something you like to do and make it a habit, just like you brush your teeth. I exercise just like I brush my teeth. It's just what I do. And it's been monumental.
Yeah. So I think that's that part where, and I think the harder part for me also is making sure I can do an intense enough workout and still recover. And so I'm into I'm not sure if you're a cold plunge person. I love cold plunges.
Yes, I take a full shower every morning and I hate it. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm almost going to start giving myself permission not to, now that I'm older, because you're going to have a heart attack doing that, right? And I hate it, but I do it.
You get the endorphins, all the good stuff. Awesome.
Well, you literally have a cold plunge?
Yeah. I have in my house. I have a cold plunge. I have a hot tub. I have a sauna, weights, all that stuff. So, and then I try to go to the gym a few times, but just sometimes you're just too busy to do all that. I try to bike to work as much as I can, because on my OR days at least, because again, you're supposed to get, there's a certain amount of activity, physical activity you're supposed to get in a week. And I think it ends up being about at least 90 minutes to an hour. And there's no way you're going to be able to get enough unless you do lots of these things. And if you look at surgeons over time, they tend to be really older surgeons tend to be more hunched over. You see lots of surgeons getting neck injuries and elbow injuries and knee injuries. And if you treat your body like an athlete, you're going to be able to recover better. You're going to be able to treat yourself better. I go to a physical therapist every 2 weeks. I have nothing wrong with me, zero. But I go to a physical therapist because if you watch that show Quarterback on Netflix, and you watch the kind of investment that like Patrick Mahomes makes and Kirk Cousins, they're really just on that, and they're just always looking for anything that's even slightly sore, because again, you want to be on top of it, because if you don't invest these types of things in your body, you're going to break down, and you have to be able to sustain the success. And again, it's actually not as selfish as you think, because if you're in a case and you have a ton of energy, you're not thinking about your back or your neck or your elbow or your wrist. If you do that, your patient's at a disadvantage. if you're in there just completely focused, having an amazing time, I can do, easily 3-4 cases and not be tired at all. And that's just because of fitness, which is all important.
Oh, good for you. Nice to know that. Everybody, we're going to wrap it up now. If Dr. Shah, if somebody wanted to talk with you directly, I do know your website is shahfacialplastics.com.
That's right.
Yeah. And then is any other way they can get a hold of you?
Probably DM me on Instagram. That's a great way. Usually I respond to like 20% of my DMs, 80% of them, sometimes someone else. You can tell it's responded by me because if it's written like a 12-year-old girl with emojis, then that's me. So
how many hours does it take you to do that though? Because some of these surgeons are going home at night and spending 2 and 3 hours interacting with their DMs. And wow, that's
usually the staff is good during the day, but just a few DMs here and there. So I'm really, when I get home, I'm really focusing on other things, because if you just try to make it all about social media and that part of it, then you're not putting your practice into making your practice better, your techniques better, your research better, all that's part of it. And I have to spend time with with my family, because if I don't, again, you don't have that complete picture of you being a fulfilled person.
Well, the theme in this podcast was balance. Good job. Good job. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for us, everybody. If you've got any comments or feedback for me, please leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com, or you can certainly DM me as well at Catherine Maley MBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.